Hello and welcome. Today we are diving back into our apologetics videos by looking into what non-biblical sources say about Jesus Christ, the central figure of Christianity, which is the religion of people who believe in a creator and all-powerful God. We are currently on a journey to see why those believers in God leap and find themselves Christian. What is the link between God and Jesus? Well, that will be all clear by the time we're done with our Christian apologetics. If you are new here, welcome. I'm happy you stopped on this channel where we talk about everything critical thinking, wisdom, and just ideas about how to be better and do better. If that sounds good to you, subscribe today and we can do this together. As I mentioned, this is the Christian Apologetics series, among other series, and it's a series designed mostly for non-believers and non-Christians, where I show why believing in a creator and, again, all-powerful God is not irrational, quite the contrary. It is the most reasonable conclusion to arrive to. And if you have missed the previous episodes, again, I do recommend that you pause this one and you catch up first. So, today we're looking into 3 additional sources, this time, as I mentioned, non-biblical sources, so sources outside of the Bible. More specifically, I want to explore with you what historians from the first century said about Jesus, as I do think it's important to know when you're thinking critically to know exactly what people thought and what people said, that were in that time or close to that time to form an idea and an opinion on the sayings of Jesus himself or people that talked to and knew Jesus from the Bible. So let's look at people outside the Bible. Let's first start with Josephus. So you might already have heard of Josephus or know of him. If not, he was a first century Jewish historian, and he provided external information, as I said, on some people and some events that we do find in the New Testament. So since he is a first century source, and him and the next 2 that I will look at, the writings and sayings do matter because they live in a close period to the life of Jesus himself. And so Josephus wrote about Jesus, and he was employed as a historian by 3 Flavian emperors. That should tell us that he wasn't, even though he was not, he was not just a fanatic or an amateur, should I say, historian, but also that he had some recognition from his work, his professional work as a historian. Now, for context, in the first century, after the death of Jesus, the people who were close to him and spread the gospel, right, the news about Jesus and who he is, we'll call them fanatics for now, they didn't get treated so well. Most of them died for their beliefs that were not welcomed by the people or the authorities. And so in Antiquities of the Jews, he mentions Jesus as a wise man and a doer of wonderful works. And he also references the crucifixion under Pilate that we saw in the previous video. So I will read a little passage of this text. It's often referred to as the Testimonium Flavianum, and it goes like this. About this time there lived Jesus, a wise man, if indeed one ought to call him a man. For he was one who performed surprising deeds and was a teacher of such people as accept the truth gladly. He won over many Jews and many of the Greeks. He was the Messiah. And when, upon the accusation of the principal men among us, Pilate had condemned him to a cross, those who had first come to love him did not cease. He appeared to them, spending a 3rd day restored to life, for the prophets of God had foretold these things and 1,000 other marvels about him. And the tribe of the Christians, so called after him, has still to this day not disappeared. End of passage. So you must know that the passages, there has been some passages that are disputed as maybe not true or not exact or invented over time. And so these passages are the ones, that are underlined in this text, showed on the screen. So I wanted to be transparent and show it as is, where he allegedly questions if Jesus should be even called a mere man, which of course should suggest that if it was a true passage of Josephus, he would have believed that he might be not just a man, right? Another one about Jesus being the Messiah, meaning if it's a true passage from the hands of Josephus, he would have believed Jesus to be the Messiah. And if it's false, then we can just take that out and not talk about his belief about, messianic Jesus or no. And the portion about being restored to life, which is talking about the resurrection. So if that passage is true, apparently Josephus, he believed that he was restored to life. And if it's a fake passage or an adding or an incorrect translation, it would mean that he never said that he believed Jesus was restored to life. But then again, on this channel, we are first talking about why it's rational to believe in God and why people become Christian. And then we will take steps after steps to get to the bottom of the truth. So we will arrive again, or I guess circle back again to the controversial passages later. But one thing is for sure. Even if we were to remove these passages, Josephus the historian wrote about Jesus as a real person who existed and who was allegedly wise, who won over many people, and who did great deeds. And he mentions that he got condemned to die on a cross, and his followers, called Christians, were still to disappear by the time he wrote that text. And as you guessed it, still the same thing in 2024. So that's that. Now let's look at Tacitus. Same, he is a Roman historian and senator who in his annals referred to the execution of Christus by Pilate during the reign of Tiberius. Here, what is the context though? So in the year 64, Rome was destroyed by a big fire, and only 3 or 4, if I remember correctly, of its 14 quarters remained intact. And so the one emperor called Nero was blamed by the Roman folks for that fire and destruction, and in return he blamed the Christians. So Tacitus, the historian we're looking at, explains what happened in that text called Annals. Now, because we're not here to talk about Rome's history per se, I just wanted to note here that in that text there is mention of Christus, from whom the name Christians for his people had its origin. And also that he suffered these people, suffered the extreme penalty during the reign and at the hands of Pilate, meaning Jesus himself suffered that extreme penalty. And it was at the hands of Pilate, just like we saw in the last episode within the biblical sources. So there is that too. Third and last, let's look at Pliny the Younger. Now here, it's a Roman governor who wrote to an emperor, the Emperor Trajan, about early Christians, and he was describing their worship of Christ as some kind of God. Now we'll note here that Pliny the Younger is not a historian, but the letters are historic because they are true letters that were sent from a governor, or I guess an authority, to the emperor about the situations that were happening. So he was governor between the years I think 111, 113 after Jesus Christ. And we have the whole set of exchanges from his letters with the Emperor Trajan on many things, right? On a variety of administrative, political matters. But two letters are the most famous, which is the one he wrote to the emperor and the letter that he got back. So I will read the passages, of his letters to the Emperor Trajan. The first passage that I will read is on the screen, and it goes, "Meanwhile, in the case of those who were denounced to me as Christians, I have observed the following procedure. I interrogated these as to whether they were Christians. Those who confessed, I interrogated a second and a third time, threatening them with punishment. Those who persisted, I ordered executed. For I had no doubt that whatever the nature of their creed, stubbornness, and inflexible obstinacy surely deserved to be punished. There were others possessed of the same folly, but because they were Roman citizens, I signed an order for them to be transferred to Rome." Later on, it goes, "Soon accusations spread, as usually happens, because of the proceedings going on, and several incidents occurred. An anonymous document was published containing the names of many persons. Those who denied that they were or had been Christians, when they invoked the gods in words dictated by me, offered prayer with incense and wine to your image, which I had ordered to be brought for this purpose, together with statues of the gods, and moreover cursed Christ, none of which those who are really Christians, it is said, can be forced to do. There I thought should be discharged. I thought should be discharged. Others named by the informer declared that they were Christians, but then denied it, asserting that they had been, but had ceased to be, some 3 years before. Others many years, some as much as 25 years. They all worshipped your image and the statues of the gods, and cursed Christ. They asserted, however, that the sum and substance of their fault or error had been that they were accustomed to meet on a fixed date before dawn and sing responsively a hymn to Christ as to a god, and to bind themselves by oath not to some crime, but to not commit fraud, theft, or adultery, not to falsify their trust, nor to refuse to return a trust when called upon to do so. When this was over, it was their custom to depart and to assemble again to partake of food, but ordinary and innocent food. Even this, they affirmed, they had ceased to do after my edict, by which, in accordance with your instructions, I had forbidden political associations." Later on, he goes, "I therefore postponed the investigation and hastened to consult you. For the matter seemed to be to warrant consulting you, especially because of the number involved. For many reasons, for many persons, of every age, every rank, and also of both sexes, and these people will be endangered. For the contagion of this superstition has spread not only to the cities, but also to the villages and farmed." End of the passages. Now, you will also note that he got a letter back from Trajan to him. And it goes, "You observed proper procedure, my dear Pliny, in citing the cases of those who had been denounced to you as Christians. For it is not possible to lay down any general rule to serve as a kind of fixed standard. They are not to be sought out. If they're denounced and proven guilty, they are to be punished, with reservation that whoever denies that he is a Christian and really proves it, that is by worshiping our gods, even though he was under suspicion in the past, shall obtain pardon through repentance. But anonymously posted accusation ought to have no place in prosecution, for this is both a dangerous kind of precedent and out of keeping with the spirit of our age. So that's the end of the passages. As you may see, that's a lot. But what we can gather is that we see, as I said, an exchange between Pliny and between the emperor. Pliny does explain what he does when he encounters these Christians or people that are denounced as Christians. He tells the emperor what he does in terms of asking them questions and asking them to deny Christ, to bow down, or I guess worship their gods. And he explains that the ones who do deny Christ or curse him are pardoned, and the ones who don't are punished, right? And so the emperor writes back, before that, we notice that some people cannot be told or will not accept to deny Christ or to curse God, but there seems to be practices where they would meet up and they have moral standards, like not, committing fraud and theft and adultery. They seem to have some kind of moral laws or moral directives for these people, as well as the categoric refusal to deny Christ. So we note that the emperor writes back that Pliny has been doing great. And, he kind of reassures him that he's been doing great and confirms that people who are, Christians or keep saying they're Christians and worshiping this Christ, or, at least denying to worship their gods, they have to be punished. So what we do mention is the mention of Christ and the mention of people called Christians and the trials of said Christians to turn away from Christianity or otherwise be punished, which goes to confirm the recordings of the apostles that's from the Bible. Now, if you want to pursue the full letters and exchanges between Pliny and the Trajan, I do encourage that you seek it out because they're interesting, and you can use the link in the description box. Lastly, we are going to look at Suetonius, who is another Roman historian who mentioned Chrestus in his work. The work is called The Lives of the Caesars, possibly referring in there to Christ and the disturbances caused by his followers. Now we should note that Suetonius lived between the years 69 and 122 after Christ. So the text itself is a set of 12 biographies about Roman emperors, and in there Suetonius refers to agitations, like I said, in the Roman Jewish community and the expulsion of some Jews from Rome, which may be the expulsion mentioned in the Acts of the Apostles in the Bible. We note, though, that in the text from and about Suetonius himself, Christians are explicitly mentioned, and someone named Christus is mentioned. So given the context and the subject of his writings, you can make what you will of that information. All right, so those were 3 examples, or I guess 4, because I included the letters in there. Those were examples of historians who lived in the years close to Jesus's time, who wrote about historical events and periods and mentioned Jesus. They also mentioned Christians and the treatment of Christians in that time. We should note that these historians were not Christians or not necessarily Christians, but had a mission to record history. And so they did by mentioning Christ, or at least a person named Chrestus or Christus. Good. So in the last episode, we've looked at what Jesus said about himself. We looked at what people in the Bible who saw and talked to Jesus said to him and about him, and what history sources said about Jesus. Later on in this series, we will dive into what other religions think or say about Jesus. But so far, I think we have a better picture of this Jesus person already. In the next episode, I will pause everything and reflect on what we have seen so far on our journey of apologetics. And by then, I will have a very, very, very important question for you. So if you are still following, I would like to thank you, of course, for your time and your attention. I sure hope this is of value to you. So please do like and subscribe so I know that you are here. As always, share this with someone who needs to hear it, or open up a conversation around you with this. More talk, not less. That's all for me. Have a good one, and I'll see you next time.